Welcome to the Peasant's Guide to Removal in Yu-Gi-Oh! Your main goal in this game is to kill your opponent, but doing that is usually pretty hard because of all these frickin' cards on the field. And so, one of the first things you learn in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is how to get rid of all these cards, or as most people call it, removal. Not all forms of removal are built the same. So today I wanted to do a quick crash course on all the different types of card removal in this game and how they work. If you're new, you might learn why certain things do and don't work, and if you're an older player, you'll probably have some corrections and extra tips to leave in the comments. So, everybody go nuts. Let's get started.
Destruction.
Destruction is your most average, brain-dead, basic type of removal in this game. If Yu-Gi-Oh! Was a game of strategic war tactics, destruction would be the equivalent of clubbing something to death with a big stick. You can think of destruction like killing a card and sending it to the graveyard. Destruction is caused by card effects that say the word destroy on it, and of course, by attacking things or getting attacked. Some cards have effects that don't let them be destroyed, and some cards have effects that go off when they're destroyed, both of which have made destruction a less reliable form of removal through the years.
Sent to the graveyard.
Card effects that send to graveyard are kind of like a weird technicality. If destruction is killing a card, cremating it, holding a small funeral, and then laying it to rest in the graveyard, sending it to graveyard is basically just skipping all these steps and teleporting that fucker directly underground. Cards that send to graveyard specify it on the card and don't use the word destruction. Since these cards are technically not destroying cards,
She's touching me.
I'm not touching you.
they work on cards with destruction protection effects. Whoa, wait. You can't destroy me, it says it right here. I ain't destroying you, now get in the coffin. Similarly, they also don't trigger effects that happen when things are destroyed, though they will still trigger effects that happen when things say sent to graveyard.
Banishment.
Lore-wise, banishment is sending your cards to another dimension. This other dimension living just to the right of your graveyard. Technically, this isn't a real zone, but most games and stuff put it here, but it can kind of go anywhere. Banishment works a lot like destruction, but using a different keyword. Similarly to destruction, effects that banish will say the word banish or remove from play, and effects that go off after being banished will also use these two keywords. But since it uses a different keyword than destruction, things that are banished don't count as being destroyed, and vice versa. Usually you'll find entire archetypes built around banishing or being banished, which usually ties into their lore. For example, the Metaphys archetype are beasts that regularly travel between the two dimensions. The DD archetype are a bunch of folks that just got sucked there, and they just kinda live there now. And psychic monsters? Well, psychic monsters just think so hard that they end up in the banished realm. I don't know the answer. Where the fuck am I?
Banish Facedown.
When Yu-Gi-Oh! First started, putting things in the graveyard was a pretty good way to get rid of things permanently, since there weren't too many cards that could bring things back. And while we did have banishment as a mechanic with things like Soul Release, it was a little bit of overkill. However, as we got more and more cards that could bring things back from the graveyard, Konami needed a new way to have things be gone permanently, and so they decided to make banishment the gone permanently removal, barring a few exceptions. But then, as we got more and more ways to bring things back from that zone, Konami needed a new way to have things be gone permanently, and instead of creating yet another zone, they decided to use banishment face down. Normally, when you banish a card, they go into your banish pile face up, similarly to how they do in your graveyard. However, banish face down banishes them, well, face down. And this comes along with a few interesting caveats. First of all, effects that happen when something is banished don't go off, because now that it's face down, the duel kinda forgets that the card even existed, and it's no longer able to go off. Secondly, while you can technically look through your banish face down pile to see what's in there, card effects cannot. So if a card effect specifies bringing back a certain card from the face down pile, that can't be done since it would involve looking at the cards there. Because of that, banish face down is effectively the only form of permanent removal in Yu-Gi-Oh! At least for now.
Return to hand.
Returning to hand, or as most people call it, bouncing to hand, boing, is one of the more double-sided forms of removal in this game. The main benefit is that most cards don't have protection against bouncing to hand specifically, so well-timed hand bounce can skirt around most protection effects. Given how many cards, or in Duel Links, skills depend on having a certain card on the field, interrupting at just the right time can stop your opponent dead in their tracks. However, the downside is that the card is given back to your opponent in their hand as a resource. And while they may not be able to use it again this turn, if you are unable to end the game quickly, your opponent will be able to play that card again on a following turn. With that said, one of the best traps in Duel Links right now is a hand bounce, so depending on the format, it still is a very useful form of removal.
Shuffle to deck.
Finally, we got one of my favorite forms of removal. Shuffling to deck is kinda like bouncing to hand's big brother. While it has all the benefits of skirting around most forms of protection, it doesn't have any of the downside of coming back on a following turn. If bouncing to hand is like sending a kid home from school for misbehaving, since they'll probably just be back the next day, shuffling to deck is like sending them straight back to their mother's womb, in that they probably ain't gonna be coming to school tomorrow. While there's not a whole lot of cards that do this, the ones that do can really mess you up.
Bonus removal speed round.
I thought I'd quickly cover some honorable mentions. These things don't technically remove cards off the field, but sort of remove them from being playable, so they're also helpful to know.
Flipping face down.
Flipping a card face down kinda makes a duel forget about them. Face down cards can't be used as material for a Link, Exceed, or Synchro Summon, so this can be very good for interrupting a combo. And while flip face down, they obviously can't activate their effects, which can be good for locking out ignition effects. Monsters that have been flipped down and then flipped back up again have some weird interactions because of how this form of removal resets the card. For example, all attack gains and losses are reset, any soft once per turn effects can be used again, and a weird one, if a crackdowned card is reset like this, it just forget who owns it and becomes your opponent's card, even if crackdown is destroyed.
Negate effects.
A card with negated effects can still be used as material for summoning. It just can't, use its effects.
Summon material lock.
I don't know what the hell this is actually called. Tell me if you know, please. But some effects can prevent cards from being used as summoning material. Warning Point, for example, pretty much stops you as using that card as material for anything.
You're done. You're done.
This is pretty detrimental, especially if you only have 3 monster zones, and as a Duel Links player, I have lost countless games to it. Knowing all the different forms of removal can help you play around your opponent, or not get played around. I'd also like to add that all of these come in targeting and non-targeting varieties, but we'll talk about what that means in a different Peasant's Guide. If I stupidly missed something, please let me know, and if not, thank you guys for watching. Be reasonable in your lives and make sure to hear another person's argument out before roasting them. Have a good day.